The Annotated, Raphael'S, Mundane Astrology, or The Effects of the Planets and Signs upon the Nations and Countries of the World, 1910, by Robert T. Cross, 1850–1923, revised, edited and annotated with extensive commentary, by Anthony Louis, 2013, based on a work in the public domain originally published in London. W. Faulsham & Co. 4, Pilgrim Street, Ludgate Hill, EC. Price 1 shilling or 25 cents, 1910. All annotations, revisions, corrections and editorial comments are copyright Anthony Louis, 2013. All rights reserved. Kindle edition 1.0, September 15, 2013. The original 1910 text by Raphael is in the public domain. It was published 103 years ago and its author, Robert T. Cross, died 90 years ago in 1923. In the United States, a work published anywhere in the world prior to 1923 is in the public domain. In the UK, an author's copyright expires 70 years after his death. Raphael's copyright in the UK expired in 1993. In this work I have revised and edited Raphael's original 1910 text, correcting errors and recalculating charts to improve their accuracy with a modern computer program. Astrological charts were cast using SolarFire Gold and Janus 4 software. The book cover contains a chart art image from SolarFire Gold by artist K. Steventon, used with permission. All other images are in the public domain. Table of Contents. Introduction by Anthony Louis. Preface by Robert T. Cross. Chapter 1, Mundane Astrology. Chapter 2, The Planetary and Zodiacal Signs and Symbols. Chapter 3, The 12 Mundane Houses, Their Power and Significations. Chapter 4, The Signification of the Planets. Chapter 5, The Essential and Accidental Dignities of the Planets. Chapter 6, The Mundane Maps. Chapter 7, How to Erect the Mundane Maps for Foreign Parts. Chapter 8, Concerning the First House and the Planets therein. Chapter 9, Concerning the Second House and the Planets therein. Chapter 10, Concerning the Third House and the Planets therein. Chapter 11, Concerning the Fourth House and the Planets therein. Chapter 12, Concerning the Fifth House and the Planets therein. Chapter 13, Concerning the Sixth House and the Planets therein. Chapter 14, Concerning the Seventh House and the Planets therein. Chapter 15, Concerning the Eighth House and the Planets therein. Chapter 16, Concerning the Ninth House and the Planets therein. Chapter 17, Concerning the 10th House and the Planets therein. Chapter 18, Concerning the 11th House and the Planets therein. Chapter 19, Concerning the 12th House and the Planets therein. Chapter 20, How to Judge a Mundane Map. Chapter 21, Example of a Mundane Map. Chapter 22, Eclipses. Chapter 23, The Effects of Solar Eclipses. Chapter 24, The Effects of Lunar Eclipses. Chapter 25, Planetary Conjunctions. Chapter 26, Earthquakes. Chapter 27, Comets. Chapter 28, The Parts of the World Affected by the Signs of the Zodiac. Appendix I. The Influenza Pandemic of 1918. Appendix II. William Lilly's Attributions of Zodiac Signs to Cities and Countries. Appendix III. Charles Carter's Misgivings about Early 20th Century Mundane Astrology. Appendix IV. Alan Leo's Prediction of the Second Boer War. Appendix V. Pluto in Mundane Astrology. Appendix VI. The Bloody Lunar Eclipse of the Battle of Gaugamela. Appendix 7, The First Raphael on Political Astrology. Appendix 8, Rhetorius of Egypt on Eclipses. Appendix 9, Evangeline Adams, Symbolic Charts and the Inception of the United States. Appendix X, Ebenezer Sibley and the July 4th Birth Chart of the United States. Introduction by Anthony Louis. Mundane Astrology, from the Latin, mundus, meaning world, universe, humankind, is the branch of the celestial science dealing with political and world events. Heads of nations have consulted mundane astrologers for thousands of years. This form of astrology, for example, was a key factor in Alexander the Great's defeat of the Persian Empire's army at Gaugamela in 331 BC. In more recent times, the German astrologer Elspeth Ebert accurately predicted Hitler's political destiny in 1923. Albeit from an allegedly incorrect horoscope cast for the Sun in the 29th degree of Aries, 1, Hitler's natal sun. In fact, occupied the 1 Street degree of Taurus when he was born on April 20, 1899. Eberton must have erroneously consulted the ephemeris for April 19, 1899, the day before Hitler's birth. As often happens in astrological forecasting, Eberton's chart for Hitler worked quite well, even though it was not based on historically accurate information. Elspeth Eberton died in Freiburg at the end of November 1944. Her son Reinhold later claimed that his mother had foreseen her own death but didn't want to relocate out of fear that her abrupt departure would panic her neighbors who believed she could tell the future. She chose to die in an air raid rather than upset her neighbors. What an altruistic lady she was. Mundane astrology can be dangerous to practice. Throughout history, court astrologers have been executed for displeasing the ruler of the nation with their predictions, regardless of whether the forecast was accurate or not. In May of 1941, Reich minister and amateur astrologer Rudolf Hess decided to fly to Scotland because he and his astrologers believed the stars foretold defeat for Germany. Hess wanted to negotiate a peace deal with the Allies. In response, Hitler became enraged and had the Gestapo round up hundreds of astrologers and occultists, too. Several stargazers were executed and the rest sent to concentration camps. The Führer blamed astrology for Hess' betrayal of Hitler's megalomaniacal idea that the German master race should rule the world. The book you are about to read looks at political astrology as it was practiced at the beginning of the 20th century. Using Raphael's 1910 text on mundane astrology as a scaffold, I have revised and amply illustrated his original text with copious explanations, clarifications, case examples and modern charts. The appendices contain a wealth of supplemental information that fleshes out Raphael's 80-page booklet, now in the public domain, and adds historical perspective to his approach. During the last 2 centuries, several authors have used the pen name Raphael to write books about astrology. They apparently chose the pseudonym because the archangel Raphael is associated with Mercury, a god of magic, divination, astrology and writing. At the time this text was originally published in 1910, astrologers in the UK wrote under pseudonyms to avoid being thrown in jail for practicing the celestial art. To verify which of the many Raphaels wrote the 1910 version of the current text, I contacted David Roll of the Astrology Center of America. David kindly responded with an email in which he explained that Raphael was the pseudonym of a series of men, starting with the first and most famous, Robert Cross Smith, 1795 to 1832. Cross Smith, the original user of the Raphael pseudonym, was succeeded by John Palmer, 1807 to 1837. And then by some lesser-known writers, Dixon, Medhurst, Wackley, Sparks, and finally by Robert T. Cross, 1850 to 1923, the well-known author of the text you are about to read. Robert T. Cross, Aries ASC, Taurus Sun, Cancer Moon, is not to be confused with the original Raphael, Robert Cross Smith, Gemini ASC, Pisces Sun and Moon, or with any of the Raphaels in between. The author of Raphael's Mundane Astrology, 1910, R. Robert T. Cross, inserted a symbol with the letter R centrally placed within a cross on the title page of his books. Figure 1. R. Robert T. Cross, R at the center of a cross. Figure 2. Birth chart of Frederick Robert Tuck Cross aka Raphael. In an article at skyscript.co.uk, Kim Farnell tells us that this Raphael was born at Brockley Farm, Worsted, East Anglia, England on May 15, 1850 at 2:35 in the morning. 3. His birth name was Frederick Robert Tuck Cross. Frederick Robert was the son of Thomas Robert Cross and Charlotte Rump. He later dropped the Frederick, perhaps to identify himself more closely with the first Raphael, Robert Cross Smith, and to capitalize on the original Raphael's fame. Having developed a strong interest in astrology at an early age, Robert T. Cross acquired the copyright to the well-known Raphael's Ephemeris in the 1870s. During the period 1877 to 1879, Mr. Cross published a Guide to Astrology, which became quite popular. Robert T. Cross died on May 29, 1923 in Worsted, Norfolk. 4. Robert Tuck Cross was a prolific writer with a knack for explaining complex astrological ideas in simple and direct language. He appears to have relied heavily on 17th century British texts for his information about mundane astrology. William Lilly's Christian Astrology, 1647, and William Ramsay's Astrology Restored 1653. Parts of his 1910 text are copied verbatim from earlier sources without acknowledgement. Because Raphael's sources date back several centuries, some of his comments appear strange and antiquated to the modern reader, especially in his chapters on interpreting eclipses in the 36 decanates and assigning astrological rulers to various locations on Earth. Nonetheless, the bulk of what Raphael presents in 1910 contains valuable information and is responsible to sparking and maintaining interest in mundane astrology for the past 100 years. In editing and annotating Raphael's 1910 text, I have left the original text intact except for a few minor changes in spelling, formatting and punctuation. Errors and typos in the original have been corrected. Astrological data has been recalculated and rendered more accurate with the use of a modern computer. Any additions to the text appear in brackets. For example, my editorial comments, which are not part of the 1910 text, appear in brackets throughout this text. I have added numerous astrological charts and case examples, not found in the original text, to illustrate Raphael's ideas and demonstrate how mundane astrology was practiced in the early 20th century. My goal has been to present a version of Raphael's mundane astrology that is readily accessible to the modern reader. The material in the appendices is not part of Raphael's original text. I have added extensive notes in the appendices to flesh out Raphael's ideas with historical case examples. Raphael, 1910, and H.S. Green, 1911, each published brief texts that outline the traditional methods of mundane astrology. There is much overlap between the two authors. In 1951, the renowned astrologer Charles Carter wrote a book which was critical of the classical methods summarized by Raphael and Green. Carter called their techniques completely inadequate. There was method in Carter's madness. He had made a fool of himself by falsely predicting that England would not enter into war with Germany in 1939. And he blamed his inaccurate prognostication on the methods he learned from studying H.S. Green. In addition, Carter was dismissive of Alan Leo's work and referred to Leo's ventures into political forecasting as feeble and unsuccessful, despite Leo's accurate prediction of the Second Boer War 10 months before it occurred. Carter was particularly bothered by the importance that traditional astrologers placed on the cardinal ingresses of the sun and the lunations, new and full moons, throughout the astrological year. He concluded from his studies of numerous mundane charts during World War II that solar cardinal ingresses and lunation charts, if studied in isolation, were barely worth casting. In Carter's experience, these charts only appeared to have value when a planet or planets fell within 1, or at most 2, degrees of an angle. Carter may have been making a straw man of traditional astrologers because of the public ridicule he experienced after his false prediction. The 17th century French astrologer Morinus, for example, never interpreted charts in isolation, but always considered a whole series of relevant charts before making a prediction. Carter stresses the significance of the birth charts of the heads of state and other key figures of a nation, comparing the nativities of the movers and shakers of a nation with the standard mundane charts, ingresses, new moons, eclipses, major conjunctions, etc., is necessary to flesh out and clarify the outline of the year shown by the ingresses. Another important point made by Carter, 1951, which barely gets addressed by Raphael or Green, is the use of birth charts of nations. These early 20th century authors claim that nations are ruled by various zodiac signs or planets, but rarely seem to use a specific chart of origin of a nation in their work. Carter stresses that if it were possible to ascertain a reliable initiation chart or nativity of a nation, then one could study such a chart and apply the transits and progressions to make accurate forecasts. Carter calls the traditional reliance on ingresses and lunations, when interpreted as stand-alone charts, pitifully insufficient. I suspect most traditional astrologers would agree with him. The reader should keep Carter's perspective in mind when going through Raphael's text. Much has happened in astrology since it was first published in 1910. Contemporary astrologers continue to contribute to our understanding of mundane charts with ideas such as midpoints, 90-degree dials, local space astrology, inception charts of cities and states, astrocartography and the like. Nonetheless, this book by Raphael is well worth reading because it sets the stage for later developments and is one of the classics of modern mundane astrology. Anthony Louis, May 2013. Preface by Robert T. Cross. Mundane Astrology has been much neglected by students. It is hoped that this little publication will draw their attention to this important branch of the science, for after all, nations, countries and cities are more important than individuals. Up to the present very little has been written on the subject since Ramsay published his Astrology Restored in the 17th century. Mundane astrology is a difficult subject, seeing that every district, town or city is under a different zodiacal influence. If this particular influence were known, it would be an easy matter to forecast the fate of any place. Our lack of knowledge of the exact place or locality governed by each degree of the zodiac is the cause of the many failures in the predictions relating to mundane events. Raphael, Robert T. Cross, 1850–1923. Chapter 1. Mundane Astrology. Mundane astrology is that branch of the science which treats of the influence of the zodiac and planets upon nations, countries, cities and divisions of the earth, and is the art of foretelling the chief events which will come to pass therein. A figure of the heavens is erected for certain times, to be afterwards explained, and for the particular places for which the forecasts are required, and the longitudes and declinations of the planets computed therefore, exactly in the same manner as in the erection of an ordinary horoscope. As in natal astrology, different influences are ascribed to the planets and the 12 divisions of the heavens, and to make forecasts from the various figures of the heavens is not a very difficult task. The student should bear in mind the various testimonies of good and evil shown, and thus may read the good or evil fortune of any particular nation or kingdom, the possibility of peace or war, health or sickness, dearth or plenty, in any particular part of the world for which the forecasts are required. In addition to this, the transits of the planets through the several signs of the zodiac have also to be considered, and the general condition of the various countries and peoples ruled by the different signs can then be ascertained. A horoscope or figure of the heavens for the moment of the sun's entry into the sign Aries is taken as the basis or groundwork for all predictions. And this, together with similar figures for the entry of the sun into the signs Cancer, Libra and Capricorn, corresponding to the commencement of each season, has the chief influence in determining the various forecasts to be made. A figure of the heavens is also to be cast for each new and full moon during the year, also for all solar and lunar eclipses, and all conjunctions of the major planets, which are Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus and Neptune. Editor's note: most mundane astrologers regard the new moon as much more significant than the full moon for political forecasting. The first Raphael, Robert Cross Smith, ranked the new moon that occurred closest to the Aries ingress as almost on an equal footing with the Aries ingress in mundane forecasting. Some of these are subsidiary to the ingresses, as the figures for the sun's entry into the 4 cardinal signs, Aries, Cancer, Libra and Capricorn are called, but the eclipses and great conjunctions which are those formed by the major planets are dealt with separately, and have a very powerful and important influence on the destinies of nations. All of these are explained in the following chapters, which are expressly written for the student, and with careful study and investigation of the various rules and instructions given, accurate and reliable forecasts may be made with ease. Chapter 2. The planetary and zodiacal signs and symbols. The first step in the study of mundane astrology is a knowledge of the names and symbols of the planetary bodies and zodiacal signs. 1. The planets are 9 in number and their names and symbols are as follows. Figure 3 Planet glyphs. Editor's note: in classical astrology the sun and moon were considered planets, that is, wanderers in the sky. When Raphael's text was first published in 1910, astrologers only knew of 9 planets. With the discovery of Pluto in 1930 the number of planets was extended to 10. On August 24, 2006 the International Astronomical Union, IAU, redefined what it means to be a planet and reclassified Pluto as a dwarf planet along with Eris and Ceres. Nonetheless, astrologers continue to view Pluto as a powerful force in mundane charts. Like Napoleon, Pluto may be of smaller size than other factors in a chart, but this dwarf planet still packs a huge wallop in the horoscope. 2. The 12 signs of the zodiac are named and symbolized as follows. Figure 4 Zodiac sign glyphs. 3. The following groups or divisions of the zodiacal sign should be committed to memory, as it is a very important factor. Triplicities: fiery. Aries, Leo, Sagittarius, airy. Gemini, Libra, Aquarius, earthy. Taurus, Virgo, Capricorn, watery. Cancer, Scorpio, Pisces. Modalities: cardinal. Aries, Cancer, Libra, Capricorn. Fixed. Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, Aquarius. Common/mutable. Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, Pisces. The planetary aspects and their symbols are as follows. Figure 5 aspect symbols. Conjunction. When two planets are in the same longitude. Parallel. When two planets are the same distance north or south of the equator. Editor's note: the technical name for this measure of distance above or below the equator is declination. Modern astrologers tend to use the parallel symbol from geometry. Vertical bar as an abbreviation for this aspect. Semi-square. A distance of 45 degrees apart. Sextile. When two planets are 60 degrees apart. Semisextile. When two planets are 30 degrees or one zodiac sign apart. Adjacent signs bear an inconjunct relationship. See discussion under quincunx. Square. 3 signs or 90 degrees apart. Trine. 120 degrees or 4 signs apart. Sesquiquadrate. 135 degrees or 4.5 signs distant. Quincunx. When two planets are 150 degrees apart. In the astrology of Ptolemy, neither the quincunx nor the semisextile are considered aspects. They are sometimes referred to as inconjuncts. Because zodiac signs that are 30 degrees, semisextile, or 150 degrees, quincunx, apart are of different elements and different modalities and are also spaced at 6 th, 8 th, or 12 th house distances with one another. The inconjunct relationship is considered stressful and may be related to illness, death or confinement. Planets in inconjunct relationship are out of sync with one another. Like people from different cultures who have radically different worldviews, there is a disjunction between the energies of the two planets in sextile or quincunx relationship, so that they are unable to work together cooperatively or can do so only with great effort and adjustment. Editor's note: opposition. 180 degrees or 6 signs distant. The student should bear in mind that all these aspects are of different strengths. The conjunction and the opposition are the most powerful, then the parallel, followed by the square, trine, and sextile, of about equal power, then the semi-square and sesquiquadrate. The orbs of the aspects, or the number of degrees from an exact aspect, in which a planet will act upon another, requires very careful handling in mundane astrology, as only very close aspects should be considered. The orbs of the planets Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus and Neptune when forming the major aspects, conjunction, sextile, square, trine and opposition, may be reckoned as 5 degrees. They are to be measured thus. Suppose Venus is forming a conjunction of Mars, then when Venus gets to within 5 degrees of Mars, the aspect will begin to operate, and will last until Venus is 5 degrees past it. The same with the other planets. The Sun and Moon have larger orbs. 8 degrees may be allowed the Sun and Moon. For the minor aspects, smaller orbs should be allowed. For the planets, 2 degrees, and for the Sun and Moon, 3 degrees. It is a very difficult subject to deal with, but the above may be taken as practically correct. For the parallel, 1 degree either way should be allowed for the Sun, Moon and planets. Thus, if the Sun is in 12 degrees north declination, and Jupiter in 13 degrees north, then they are in parallel and will remain in this aspect until the difference of their declinations amounts to more than a degree. Editor's note: Raphael's example is confusing. He probably means that if two planets are in the same degree of declination, they are always in parallel. If the planets are in adjacent degrees of declination, as in the example with the Sun in 12 degrees N and Jupiter in 13 degrees N, then the Sun and Jupiter can be considered parallel as long as they are no more than 1 degree apart. If the Sun were at the beginning of 12 degrees N and Jupiter at the end of 13 degrees N, then they would be almost 2 degrees apart and not considered parallel. For the cusps of the mundane houses, observe the following rule. Find the number of degrees between one house and the next and divide it by 3, and reckon this 1/3 as the orb of the cusp of the house. Thus if the 12th house is Aquarius 13 degrees, and the ascendantary is 0 degrees. Find the difference between these 2 degrees, which is 47 degrees, and 1/3 of this is nearly 16 degrees. So when a planet gets within 16 degrees of Aries 0 degrees, it is to be reckoned as in the ascendant, or first house. Editor's note: this is an unusual rule, and I don't know Raphael's source for it. More commonly, astrologers have considered a planet in the last 5 degrees of a house to belong to the following house. Raphael's rule means that a planet in the final third of a house can be regarded as belonging in the subsequent house. An alternative to the 5-degree rule or to Raphael's method of trisecting houses would be to use whole sign houses in which the sign of the ASC becomes the entire one. Street, house, and the remaining signs in order become the remaining houses. While using house systems such as Placidus, I have found that a planet entering a sign often triggers an event related to the house with that sign on its cusp. Chapter 3: The 12 Mundane Houses, Their Power and Significations. In dealing with this, the same rules must be applied as in delineating a horoscope, for where the latter applies to an individual, in mundane astrology it refers to a nation, and it therefore follows that the same mode of procedure must be applied, but in a more extended form. The influence of the 12 mundane houses in connection with national affairs is as follows. Editor's note: included in brackets are keywords from other sources on mundane astrology. These are not part of Raphael's 1910 text. 5. The first house: the common people, public health, general conditions of the country, and the state of home affairs generally. Also, the country and its inhabitants, the nation's image and appearance, its physical condition and prosperity, its infrastructure, the general health of the populace, domestic affairs, grassroots opinions. Ancient astrologers called the 1 street house the helm, as in the helm of a ship. In natal astrology, the 1 street house represents the head, and Mercury, as signifier of speech and the tongue, rejoices here. The second house: national exchequer, revenue, stock exchange, banks, commercial affairs and trade. Also, the money market, GNP, the nation's assets, exports, consumer confidence and purchasing power, the strength of the currency, monetary instruments, taxation, revenue, money lent to other countries, the general wealth of the nation. The ancient name of the 2 house was the gate of Hades. Perhaps money is the root of all evil. The third house: railways and matters to do with them, traffic returns, stocks and shares, telegraph, telephone and postal affairs, locomotions and means of transit, motors, omnibuses, and the like, books, newspapers and literary concerns. Also, modes of transportation, the automobile industry, roads and bridges, railways, information technology, communications, means of conveying information, telephones, messages, documents, literature, writers, media, periodicals, the press, neighboring nations, the language of the country, education, the school system, with the 5th house. The 3 road was the house of the goddess in Hellenistic astrology, the moon goddess, who is constantly changing and moves so quickly through the heavens, rejoices in the 3 road house. The fourth house: the weather, agriculture, crops and landed interest, mines, public buildings, and the opposition part to the government. Also, real estate, housing, land and landowners, cemeteries, graves, natural resources, goods of the earth, farms, climate, the harvest, minerals, ores, underground resources, treasures in the earth, the opposition political party, national traditions, families, the homeland, cities, towns, clans, patriotic movements. Ancient astrologers called the 4th house the subterranean place. The 5th house: theaters, music halls and places of amusement, children, education, birth, rate, schools, morals and betting. Also, sports, gambling, casinos, the creative arts, dramatic actors, the entertainment and fashion industries, parks, public places of recreation, pregnancy, the birth rate, sex and romance, activities of children, schools, with the 3 road house, speculation in stocks, the stock market, colonies that depend on the homeland, diplomats, ambassadors. The ancient name of the 5th house was good fortune. The lesser benefic Venus, the goddess of love and pleasure, rejoices in the fun-loving 5th house. The 6th house, sickness, public health, army and navy, warships, working classes generally. Also, the armed forces, the nation's workers and servants, trade unions, strikes, wages, the unemployment rate, the food industry, food reserves, those who provide services, employees, civil service, libraries, record keepers, the police, the military, National Guard, sanitation, medicine, outbreaks of disease, epidemics, healthcare workers. The ancient name of the 6th house was bad fortune, and in Hellenistic astrology it was a house of enemies, accidents and injuries. In Vedic astrology, enemies are still examined through the 6th house of the horoscope. The 6th house rules sickness, and one can consider pathogens enemies of the body. The lesser malefic Mars, the god of war and phallic prowess, rejoices in the 6th house. The 7th house, foreign affairs, and relations with other powers. War and international disputes, marriages, divorces, foreign trade. Also, alliances, business partnerships, treaties, binding agreements, relations with other countries, truces, open or public enemies, opponents in a conflict, adversaries, international warfare, disputes, lawsuits, tugs of war, public relations. Hellenistic astrologers called the 7th the setting place because the sun sets at its cusp. In ancient times the setting sun was a metaphor for the death of the body represented by the ascendant. As Western astrology developed over the centuries, death was moved to the 8th house, and open enemies were moved from the 6th house to the 7th. Perhaps it would be wise to think of the 7th house as ruling any type of open adversary in a conflict and the 6th house as signifying known enemies who insidiously want to harm us. Secret enemies have remained a 12th house association. The 8th house, mortality, death rate, suicides, Privy Council. Also, the national debt, tax collection, trade centers, world finance, economic ties with other nations, foreign investments, world banks, inheritance, legacies, probate, social security, interest rates, state funerals, national mourning, assassinations, dangers and deaths from natural or man-made disasters, the kinds of people who die, life and death situations, multinational corporations, resources of adversaries. The ancient name of the 8th house was the idle place. I guess if you're dead, you're pretty idle. The 9th house, law courts, judges, clergy, religion, colonial trade and affairs, commercial powers, science, shipping, and matters to do therewith. Also, foreigners, matters abroad, foreign relations, long-distance travel, foreign journeys, the nation's overseas interests, religious institutions and affairs, cults, courts and the justice system, legal matters, the law, morality, international law, universities, higher education, scientific institutions, specialized studies, science, invention, publishing, broadcasting, wireless and international communications, sea and air traffic, as opposed to 3. Road, house land traffic, divination. The early name of the 9th house was the place of God, most likely referring to the Egyptian sun god. The 10th house, the king, royalty, government, ruling powers, aristocracy, nobility and society. Also, the head of state, the president or chief executive, the executive power and actions of the government, the seat of power in the nation, people in authority, the ruling classes, administration, national honor, the nation's credit and reputation, the political party in power. The ancients called the 10th house the Mahavan for obvious reasons. CEO Carter says that the 10th house is probably the most important and powerful of all houses in mundane astrology, and bodies here have a wide significance. 6. He gives the example of Jupiter in the 10th, symbolizing the Festival of Britain in the 1951 Aries Ingress chart. The 11th house, Parliament, House of Commons, legislation. Also, the cabinet, council or group of advisors of a king or chief executive of a government, local governments, town councils, those who assist elected officials, allies of the nation, resources of the ruling party, associations, community groups, the legislature, legislation, future plans, the hopes and ideals of the nation. In Hellenistic times the 11th was known as the House of the Good Spirit and was a place that brought joy to good-spirited Zeus, Jupiter, the king of the gods of Mount Olympus. The 12th house, prisons, workhouses, hospitals, asylums, reformatories, charitable institutions, crime, murders, criminals, spies and secret foes. Also, places of seclusion or restricted freedom, cloisters, monasteries, mental hospitals, asylums, reformatories, charitable institutions, secret enemies, covert actions, conspiracies, losses, grief, mishaps, subversion, terrorism, behind-the-scenes activities, secret societies, slavery, exile. In Hellenistic times the 12th was known as the House of the Bad Spirit. Bad-spirited Saturn, the bad-spirited planet of constriction and hardship, rejoices in the 12th house of limitations, misery and restricted freedom. Note: the strongest houses are the 1st, 10th, 7th and 4th, then the 2nd, 5th, 8th and 11th, and lastly, the 3rd, 6th, 9th and 12th. The 1st, 3rd and 9th are termed the intellectual houses, 1, 3 and 9, because the 1st represents the minds of the people, the 3rd has to do with newspapers and the like, and 9th represents the religious attitude of the people. Editor's note: to summarize, in Raphael's scheme the houses in order of their strength run as follows: 1, 10, 7, 4, 2, 5, 8, 11, 3, 6, 9, and 12. In the 17th century, however, William Lilly regarded the strength of the houses to be, in descending order, 1, 10, 7, 4, 11, 5, 9, 3, 2, 8, 6, and 12. In traditional astrology, houses 6, 8, and 12 were regarded as particularly unfortunate because they signified sickness, enemies, damage, dying, anguish of mind, misery and loss of freedom. House 4 was sometimes considered unfortunate because it represents final endings and the grave. House 7 was potentially unfortunate because it opposed the ascendant and symbolized war, open enemies, lawsuits, divorce and death through its association with the sunset as a metaphor for the end of life. Chapter 4, The Signification of the Planets. The Sun, Moon and planets have a special significance in mundane astrology, as they represent certain classes of the community in every nation and country. It is very essential that these should be carefully committed to memory. The following are the different classes, and particular matters ruled over by the planets. Editor's note: I have added in brackets some additional meanings suggested by H.S. Green in his 1911 book on mundane astrology. In addition, traditional astrology assigns each of the 7 visible planets to a particular house whose activities the planet especially enjoys. These joys of the planets have also been included. The Sun represents the king, nobles, magistrates, judges and all persons in authority and of distinction, cabinet ministers, and the like. Also, heads of state, leaders, the person in charge of any undertaking, superiors, royalty, the government, honor, splendor, pomp, ceremony, dignity, magnificence. The 9th is the house of joy of the sun god. The moon denotes the common people, women generally, crowds, and all matters of a common or public nature. Also, the people as opposed to the monarch, democracy as opposed to aristocracy, the sea, water generally and occupations connected therewith, crops, land, traveling, childcare, family units, women and children. The 3 road is the house of joy of the moon goddess. Mercury governs the literary world, newspapers, publishers, ambassadors, trade and commerce, and the intellectual world. Also, the intellect, education, young people, students, teachers, writers, libraries, speakers, science, clerks, clerical work, travelers, the post office, means of transit, railways, trade, commerce, shrewd bargaining, advertising, obtaining news, radio, TV, lecturing, public speaking, political meetings and debates. The 1 street is the house of joy of Mercury. Venus has rule over the female sex, artists, musicians, marriage, children, and births. Also, courtship, engagements, public festivals and holidays, places of culture and refinement, art, theater, poetry, amusement, ornaments, fashion, good feeling, prosperity, peace. The 5th is the house of joy of Venus. Mars denotes soldiers, surgeons, noted military and naval men, war, disputes, fire and incendiarism. Also, action, desire, activity, contention, sailors, police, agitators, rebels, violent crime, engineers, iron workers, poisons, infectious diseases, fevers, epidemics, dangerous or violent events. The 6th is the house of joy of Mars. Jupiter rules the religious and judicial world, divines, judges, lawyers, bankers, merchants, etc. Also, the judicial attitude of mind, magistrates, churches, universities, clergy, physicians, philanthropic movements, nobility, inquiries, prosperity, peace, public ceremonials. The 11th is the house of joy of Jupiter. Saturn has chief influence over elderly people, landowners, farmers, mines, coal, and the produce of the earth. Also, administrators, practical people, state officials, municipal officers, state employees, impartiality, law and order, system, method, prudence, the land and occupations connected therewith, quarries, resources that are mined from the earth, buildings. The 12th is the house of joy of Saturn. Uranus has special influence over railways, societies and associations, gas and water companies, civic bodies, strikes, rioting, and the like. Aerial navigation and scientific discoveries come also under this planet's rule, also explorations, anarchy and nihilism. Also, people who exercise power and authority in the nation, supreme lawmaking power, societies, associations, incorporated bodies, inventors, occultists, astrologers, unusual occupations, electricity, possibly aviation, riots, strikes, rebellion, explosions. Neptune rules socialism, suffragettes, the smart set, plots, sedition, fraud and swindling, all illicit undertakings, bogus companies, and all the lower and more degrading forms of vice and wickedness. Also, democratic political movements, utopian ideas, fluctuations of popular opinion, hospitals, charities, mediums, psychics, mystics, imaginative art and music, chaotic conditions, instability, scandal, drunkenness, dishonesty, deception, sensationalism, popular uprisings and discontent. Editor's note: Pluto was discovered on February 18, 1930, some 20 years after Raphael's book was originally published and 7 years after the death of its author. Modern astrologers associate Pluto with regeneration, rebirth, metamorphosis, decay, purgation, waste disposal, sweeping changes, revelation of hidden things, depth psychology, covert activities, the underworld, the coercive use of force, organized crime, atomic power and great wealth. Reinhold Eberton linked Pluto to force measure, providence, invisible forces, coercion, extremism, and the will to exercise power or control over the masses. 7. Pluto acts as a force for creative destruction that radically alters or transforms whatever it contacts in the chart. The extreme force of Pluto can appear in acts of violence, fanaticism, abuse, rape, mass murder or terrorism. Pluto is often active at times of a nation's vehement response to an outside threat to its security. For example, the most significant transit during the summer of 2001 was Saturn opposite Pluto, which became exact about a month before the destruction of the World Trade Center. Note: the particular house position of the planets must be taken into chief account in judging the above. For example, Neptune in the 10th would show socialistic agitation against the king and government. The same planet in the 12th would represent scandals and unpleasant events in connection with institutions. It is essential that the house influence and planetary influence should be combined. This will be explained later on. Chapter 5. The essential and accidental dignities of the planets. The essential and accidental dignities of the planets is a point of much importance in mundane astrology. The signs are distributed among the planets in the following order, and a planet is said to rule over a sign. Editor's note: when Raphael refers to houses below, he does not mean the mundane houses discussed in Chapter 3, but rather the home signs, or domiciles, of the planets. These are the signs that a planet is said to govern or rule over. Rise and Scorpio are the houses of Mars. Taurus and Libra are the houses of Venus. Gemini and Virgo are the houses of Mercury. Sagittarius and Pisces are the houses of Jupiter. Capricorn and Aquarius are the houses of Saturn. Leo is the house of the Sun. Cancer is the house of the Moon. These signs are called the houses or mansions of the planets because, when a planet is placed in a sign it rules over, it is very powerful and is then essentially dignified. The rulership of the signs by the planets is brought into use very considerably in mundane matters, for when Aries rises, Mars is the ruler of the figure, and the position and aspects of this planet would show the general condition of the people and country at any particular time. The same with the other houses, but particular attention is to be paid to this point when there are no planets in the house under consideration. There are certain other signs in which the planets are found to be very powerful, though not to the same degree as when in their own houses. These are called the exaltations of the planets and are as follows. The Sun is exalted in the sign Aries, the Moon is exalted in Taurus, Jupiter is exalted in Cancer, Mercury is exalted in Virgo, Saturn is exalted in Libra, Mars is exalted in Capricorn, Venus is exalted in Pisces, Uranus is powerful in the Aries signs, Gemini, Libra, Aquarius. Neptune is chiefly powerful in Pisces. Note, the signs opposite to those in which the planets have their exaltation are those of their fall, and then they are especially weak in power. The planets are also said to be in their detriment, when they are placed in the signs opposite to those which are their houses or mansions. The accidental dignities consist of the position of the planets in respect to the angles of the figure. The first, 10th, 7th and 4th houses of the map of the heavens are termed angular, and any planet placed in one of these houses is said to be accidentally dignified. Chapter 6, The Mundane Maps. Several horoscopes or figures of the heavens which are to be erected for various times during the year, and from which prognostics are made with regard to different nations of the world, are termed the mundane maps and comprise the following. Editor's note: Here is a list of the 5 types of charts that are most important in mundane astrology. CEO Carter, 8, 1951, adds the stations of planets to Raphael's list. 1. Quarterly figures. The sun's ingresses into the 4 cardinal signs. 2. Lunations. New and full moons, the new moon being the most important. The original Raphael, Robert Cross Smith, 1795 to 1832, stated that the new moon nearest to the vernal equinox, the first new moon of the infant year, is of particular and essential force, and a study of that lunation joined to the effects denoted in the vernal ingress will enable the astrologer to arrive at the most perfect conclusions, relative to the destiny of that nation, for which his calculations are made. 9.3. Solar eclipses. The new moon of the solar eclipse. 4. Lunar eclipses. The full moon of the lunar eclipse. 5. Conjunctions and oppositions.